Herman goes jeeping. Summer had arrived in the mountains. Herman and his family were enjoying life in their home in the woodpile next to the cook shack. One day, Herman, his grandfather George, and son Harry went out exploring. They sneaked into the shed where the jeep from the cabin was stored. Climbing around, they discovered that the seats were stuffed with wonderful soft filling. The three mice filled their mouths with the soft filling and headed back to the woodpile. "This stuff is wonderful!" Hester exclaimed. "Please go and get some more, and I will put it in each of our beds." They had made several trips to the jeep, and the hole in the seat was getting bigger and bigger. Just as they came back for even more, the shed door opened, and a man came in and started the jeep. The mice hid inside the passenger seat, hoping for the best. The man drove the jeep to the cabin where he picked up his friend. "It's a really nice day," he said. "Let's go jeeping." The jeep headed up the trail into the canyon. The trail wound through the rocky canyon and up a steep hill. They drove past junk people had left beside the trail. At one point there was an old bed spring, and at another there was an abandoned refrigerator lying on its side with the door open. Up and up the trail went until they reached the top of the mountain. "Look," the man said to his friend. "We are going to get a storm soon. Let's head back." The mice were listening in the back of the jeep. They had decided the best thing for them to do was to leave the jeep and try to make their way home by themselves. "Doesn't look good," said George. "We really have to figure out a way to get ourselves back home." Wow, were they high up in the mountains. "Look," squeaked Harry. "There's a storm coming. We better do something fast, otherwise we are going to get caught in it." "Let's get going then," George answered, and the mice began their way down the mountain at a steady trot. They were in the mountains where flash floods were common. Only an inch of rain would produce a roaring torrent of water that could sweep them away. As they scurried down the trail, raindrops began to fall, softly at first, and then harder and harder. The abandoned refrigerator was just ahead, and the three wet mice scrambled inside for shelter. A small lizard was also hiding in the refrigerator. They eyed each other suspiciously. Water began flowing down the canyon trail. It was filling up the bottom of the refrigerator. The mice and the lizard climbed the wire racks to stay ahead of the flood and to keep dry. Higher and higher they climbed, with the water steadily rising behind them. Herman scrambled into the freezer compartment and called to George and Harry. "I think we are saved! Get up here, quick!" The mice clambered into the freezer compartment, followed closely by the lizard. Inside, Herman had found 2 plastic ice cube trays. "We can slide these ice cube trays into the water as it comes to the edge of the shelf and ride the trays like rafts on top of the water." "It's an idea," George agreed. "I hope it works," chimed in Harry. "Me too," said the lizard. The 4 of them positioned themselves for takeoff. The water continued to rise. Soon, the water was washing across the edge of the shelf. Harry and the lizard climbed into their ice cube tray, and Herman and George pushed them off into the torrent. Quickly, they were gone, splashing and spinning in the rough water. George and Herman climbed into their tray just as the raging flash flood lifted it off the shelf. Away they went. They had no paddles and could not steer. The tray spun in circles and rolled the waves up and down. It was the most amazing ride. Finally, their wild ride was stopped by crashing into a huge boulder, smashing the ice cube tray. "Where's Harry?" yelled Herman above the roar of the cascading water. "I don't know," answered George in obvious dismay. "His tray went flying off in a different direction, and he's with that lizard." With that, another wave of water rushed over them. Herman and George caught onto a weed growing on the top of the boulder and held on for dear life. Harry and the lizard were still afloat in the rushing water. Their tray rode a clear path down the side of the mountain, finally landing in a flat spot. The tray had cracked in many spots, and it looked as if it were about to fall apart, so they jumped out and ran for shelter from the still cascading water. "Over here," squeaked Harry to the lizard. "There's a flat rock sticking out on the side of the mountain that we can sit on. The water will bypass it and we'll be safe until the storm is over." Both had been frightened by the flood, but now had reason to be scared of each other. Herman and George spotted a tree branch floating in the rushing water. They both jumped onto the branch and held on for dear life. It did not float evenly, and both mice were getting dunked and tossed as they used all their strength to keep from falling off. "I can't hold on much longer," sputtered George as they rounded a corner and were thrown to the top of a pile of branches that had become stuck behind a large flat rock. Slowly and carefully, George and Herman made their way through the branches and up the side of the rock. They were exhausted as they pulled themselves up the last few inches. Finally, their noses cleared the edge, and there were Harry and the lizard facing off and staring at each other. "Dad!" shouted Harry as he ran to help him onto the top of the rock. He then pulled George up as well. "The rain is stopping," noted the lizard. "Yes, it is," responded George as he shook himself, trying to dry out a little. "In a little while, there will be no trace of this horrible flash flood except for a couple of puddles and stacks of debris," said Herman. Harry and the lizard were staring at each other again. "Shouldn't I be planning to eat you?" asked the lizard. "Aren't we supposed to be natural enemies?" "Maybe," answered Harry, "but I did save your life, and there is nothing to say we can't declare a truce, is there?" They wound their tails together to seal the friendship. "How far do you think we are from our home in the woodpile?" asked Herman. "Not far at all," answered George. "Look over there on the hill. I can see the cabin and the jeep." Over in the woodpile, Hester and the twins were sitting around the matchbox table, worried about what might have happened to Herman, Harry, and George. They had seen the jeep drive up and had expected to see the three mice jump out, heading for cover in the woodpile. Hester knew she had to stay calm for the sake of Minnie and Winnie. But what would happen to them if something had happened to Herman, Harry, and George? To keep busy, they continued to stuff the beds with the soft filling, hoping and praying for their safe return. Outside by the jeep, the two men were busy examining the hole in the upholstery. The owner of the jeep was really angry, saying, "Drat those mice! I am going to get an exterminator to come out here and get rid of them once and for all." As the three mice and the lizard trudged by the cabin, They heard the threat, but they were too tired to discuss it. A mile of rocky terrain is hard work for little creatures. Finally, Minnie and Winnie, who had been posted as lookouts, saw the bedraggled group coming up the path from the cabin. "They're home!" they squeaked in unison. "Mom, they're home!" Hester scurried out from the woodpile just as Herman, George, Harry, and the lizard came around the corner. Although they did not know the lizard, everyone hugged everyone, glad to be safely home. All of them, including the lizard, sat on the woodpile and talked about their adventure. Lizzie the lizard was introduced to Hester, Minnie, and Winnie. George, the oldest and wisest, told the family that they must be very careful because the man from the cabin was thinking about getting an exterminator. They needed to watch for poisons and traps. Herman and his family showed Lizzie around the woodpile, and Lizzie picked out a nice place to make his home, close to the cook shack so he could run up the wall and catch flies whenever he wanted. Tired but happy to all be together again as a family, the mice went to sleep in their very soft beds and dreamed about ice cube tray rafting and other adventures. The end, for now.